Reducing the size of our government, President Trump's budget includes an $8 million increase for the Office of Management and Budget to help reorganize the government and reduce regulations. Joining us now is Barry Anderson, former OMB acting director. Looking at, without a plan, 9 states are missing their budget deadline. But again, President Trump is trying to get the federal budget in line. Barry, what do you make of the president's plan on the federal budget?
Well, he has some good ideas, but one of the major ones is what you just mentioned with respect to what OMB can do, and that is look at regulations. OMB is not just the Office of Management and Budget, but it also has the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs in it, and having them take a very, very careful look at the regulatory aspects in this of the federal government is long overdue. So that aspect of it is very good. With respect to looking at some of the major drivers of our fiscal unsustainability, such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, he didn't touch Social Security and Medicare. But Medicaid is being looked at in both the Health and in the House and the Senate bills, and that is something that's long, long overdue too.
Barry, Mike Block here. You know, a lot of these governors, even the Republican ones, are getting pushback on doing anything to Medicaid. They're worried about getting reelected. They're worried about their incumbency. What's your advice to them about biting the bullet and doing what needs to be done, as you put it?
Medicaid is a joint state-federal program. The states pay about half the costs, but the feds set all the regulations. In the years I spent at the National Governors Association, Democratic and Republican governors chafed at the fact that Medicaid now consumes more than any other category of their budget, including elementary and secondary education. Yet all of the rules are set by the federal government. Turning more and more power over to the states is a good thing, but until we get cost controls on health care costs, we're going to see states suffer what they're suffering now. That is, not enough money for schools, not enough money for parks, not enough money for infrastructure. Health care is eating the states alive, as it is eating the federal government's finances.
Larry,
it makes everything tougher.
Can we talk a little bit about growth? The Trump administration is expecting growth to hit 3% over the next few years and is hoping that will help to fund some of the tax cuts and the overall budget and help to balance the budget over a decade. What kind of growth do you think we can expect, and how much can that be leaned on to balance the budget over 10 years?
The Congressional Budget Office just released last week their updated economic and budget forecast. I think they bent over backwards to get growth up in the future closer to 2%, not 3%. There have been some reports how productivity has been underestimated, and productivity is a major contribution of growth, and that it could push growth up higher than 2%. But still, getting it up to as high as 2.5%, I think, is a reach. So the 3% in the budget projections, it just be sort of beyond what I think we can reasonably get. And then to count that money, not just once, but twice, or even more than that, as the budget does, well, that's a real stretch, too. You got to keep your mathematics right if you're going to have credibility and convince the Congress and the public of the reasonableness of your proposals.
Heather?
Barry, if you were still at OMB and you had a mandate, as they do now, to completely reevaluate what is going on here and whether there are better and different ways of doing things, what is the best advice you would give them for thinking outside the box and doing things differently?
Grandchildren. By that I mean, when you think about the budget, there's so much that are intergenerational transfers between the people who are working now, the people who are not working now because they're too old, and the young. And what we continue to do is take money out of the people who are working now and give it to people like myself, the elderly. Well,
not elderly, Barry.
It's not all elderly, but it is too much of a transfer from the people working now to the people who are retired or basically not working now. I know those are very simple terms, but I would really start looking at how we can make better intergenerational equity. I really think that we, not just the administration or the Congress, but we as a country have to think of how much money we spend on the elderly versus how much we spend on the young. And in particular, if we continue to borrow more and more, we're basically borrowing not just from the young, but we're borrowing from people who will have to pay it back, kids who aren't yet born yet.
So
where I would start.
To that point, Heather, 60% of the money that's spent on nursing homes in this country is from Medicaid.
Oh, absolutely.
60%.
Yes.
And that is, and the states, Barry, the states have made it very easy for people to shelter their wealth, so they qualify for Medicaid, so the heirs actually do get to keep the assets. I mean, I think you would agree with that.
They can shelter home values of greater than $500,000. I can tell you none of my kids have a home worth $500,000, and the average price of homes around the country is only $200,000.
Strauss and Howe have this marvelous book called The Fourth Turning. It's about 20 years old now, but it predicted what was going to happen as we move through generational shifts in terms of who's in what position, because you see these patterns over and over again. And one of the things they predict is the GI generation moves off into the sunset and the silent generation then comes along, they're going to look at their own assets and say, it is crazy that I'm doing so well and young people have to pay so much. And that is when you are going to find a cultural shift that allows taking on these entitlement shifts and transfer payments and scaling them back. So you're ahead of your time.
Barry, thank you for that. Yes, I have that argument with my parents all the time, and I remind them that I'm paying for their Medicare. They don't like to hear that. We get in, and we're all conservatives in that household, but they don't like to hear that. Barry, thank you so much. Great insight, Barry Anderson.